Hi, my name is Anne McElhenney.
And I'm Phelim McAleer.
Welcome to the Anne and Phelim Scoop. It is 1 year and 3.5 months since the 2 weeks to flatten the curve lockdown, Phelim.
Yes, right. Remember that. We're going to just 2 weeks going to flatten the curve, and then everything was going to be trust us, said the government. And I would like to add that it's 13 days since it was first revealed that Hunter Biden used the N-word, and the mainstream media has failed to report on it. So
this is going to be a new one now. We're going to have to add that. We're going to have many days it is since the lockdown started, and then it's going to have to be how many days it is since the media ignored a massive story of a celebrity using the N-word. And
this is the media who if a 14-year-old used it, they brought it back when she was 18 and ruined her life.
Yeah,
that's what the New York Times did. They ruined her life.
Tell us about that story again.
It was a girl who was at school, and she used it singing, I think, along to a song in a video, and sent it out to her friends, not just to her friends in the school. Oh, yeah. And one activist girl held on to that video, held on to it.
What a sweetheart!
Until the girl was going to college and got accepted to colleges, and then released it to the colleges.
So then the colleges withdrew.
Of course, these cowards, these craven cowards.
Worst.
Yeah. So, but anyway, Hunter Biden gets a ball because he's Hunter Biden. So that's why, actually, you need to help us make the Hunter Biden movie. So, yeah, as I say, that's why, we need to make this movie. And that's why Hollywood's not going to make it. The mainstream media, they're covering up for it. They won't even report him using the N-word. So please go to mysonhunter.com, give what you can. We're almost at $1 million now, raised from small donations from people like yourselves, from our supporters. This is going ahead. It's going to happen, but we need your help to make sure it happens.
So please go to mysonhunter.com and give what you can. Thanks so much.
Yeah. So what else is on the show today? The last states to fall. Shocking scenes in Washington, D.C. Police in a church enforcing a mask mandate in church. Armed police.
One of our listeners sent us.
And you won't see that anywhere else. And back to normal in California, but people are sad that they're back to normal. We look at the doom porn and the sadness that people have.
And we hope our pod can cheer you up. But we are going to be talking to Lionel Shriver about her new book, which we hope will help cheer you up, even though her book is about euthanasia. But seriously, it is actually a fun story. It really is. Yeah.
And we ask, was Trump right about everything? Yes, he was. And remember the blackout in Texas in February, Anne?
Yes, well, we've got a very depressing update about what happened there, so you want to hang on for that. And sometimes you read a headline and you just can't believe it's real, or that a serious journalist wrote it. But the Irish Times are very good at producing and supplying us with those kind of headlines.
Yeah. I mean, either irony's dead or journalism's dead, and I'm not sure which. What's on our viewing recommendations?
And we have some viewing recommendations. The first one I'm just going to give you right now, which is we mentioned recently the Detransmission, the documentary called "What's the Rush to Reassign Gender?" Yeah, it's on YouTube. It's free, and I watched it, and I would recommend it. Yeah, and we're also watching Call My Agent on Netflix, and we'll talk about that if we remember later on. Yeah. But it's basically, if we don't remember, it's a little bit of adult content, by the way. We just have to say that, but we thought it was very funny. And we have a recipe, a delicious recipe for a healthy smoothie, which we'll bring later as well. But first of all,
let's start the program.
So we're back here. We're in California in a sort of normal. We've gone back slightly to normal a bit in California. But it's California, so it's never really going to be normal ever anyway, right? Yeah. And particularly because there are so many people who are in love with the pandemic, actually, and in love with the doom, and in love with wearing masks, and who are wearing masks like in the most continue to wear masks in the most ludicrous places ever, right?
Yes.
And it's like a uniform, and they're wearing them really
and they have
proudly.
Kids on and still have kids on the beach in masks.
Yeah, it's really terrible. But we got a very chilling story from one of our listeners who says, and we're going to protect the identity of this person. They don't want to be identified. Hi, Anne and Phelim. I'm a regular listener to your podcast and general consumer of your work. You guys are the best. Thank you. I was at the Basilica of the National Shrine of the Immaculate Conception in DC yesterday for the ordination of one priest and several transitional deacons. And two of the transitional deacons are from our listener's parish. And basically, there's still the listener goes on to say there's still a mask mandate in DC and the shrine is enforcing it. Fair enough, right? Mm-hmm. The Archdiocese already fought with the city and took them to court over allowing a higher capacity of people in the shrine because it's a very large church, the largest in the United States, actually. So all the attendees were required to wear a mask, no problem, right? But during the Holy Mass, a DC Metropolitan Police officer started walking down one aisle next to aisle after aisle after aisle, checking for compliance. This is mask compliance. Of the 100 or so people she observed, there were maybe 4 or 5 not wearing masks. She was very quick to tell them they needed to put their masks on and would not leave them alone until they complied. She only patrolled our section of the shrine, while many other people didn't see her. It was so alarming and offensive to have someone with a gun walking down the aisle of this sacred space during the sacrament.
Yeah.
Just an awful, awful image. What an awful, scary image. And we're worse to put up with it. People are worse to put up with it.
And the church
was worse not to have her thrown out and say, take us to court, but you are not going to be...
By the way, you need a warrant to come into people's property, and start enforcing the law. So she had no warrant to go in there. Why did the church tolerate that?
I don't know. But people, I think we had this conversation, and this conversation gets mirrored a little bit later, maybe when we're talking to Lionel Shriver. But but people have been very compliant, and they're too compliant, and people are too civil and too polite for our own good, actually, and it'll come back to bite us. But if that scene in the church in Washington wasn't bad enough, we've had it on a national level, celebrities doing awful things that we will bring you a little touch of. Just if you haven't seen this is like the worst thing ever. And so you now have celebrities taking, to music to bully people and to be, mouthpieces for the government. It's really a weird combination. The first one that we want to show with you here, a little tiny piece of this, it's just horrific. The Late Late Show, James Corden and Ariana Grande and a person called Marissa Jarrett Winokur, who I don't know, sing a song called No Lockdowns Anymore. Here's a little taste of it.
Woke up today, feeling okay. Wow, this is new. Got the vaccine and it's been 2 weeks. There's life in the streets, hot people at brunch, and I've got a hunch mimosas are gonna be bottomless. Turning off Zoom after 15 long months stuck on mute. No lockdowns anymore. We can finally walk out the door. The sunlight is a fantasy. It still doesn't feel real to me. No lockdowns anymore. Will they still take my temp at the door? Shout out to our favorite MD, Anthony Fauci. Ready for life to restart. No lockdowns anymore.
Gonna live the next year outdoors.
We could see a movie at 3.
Making plans is like sex to me.
No lockdowns, we're free.
Well, that's as much of a taste as I can stomach,
Yeah, no lockdowns anymore. I mean, this is the part.
Shout out to our favourite MD, Anthony Fauci. Oh.
Look at my hair. I'm now, it's just a horrible, horrible song. And if that wasn't bad enough, the other obnoxious creature who's at the same nonsense is Stephen Colbert. And here's what he did. And he released this appalling vaccine. This is a real vaccine bullying musical arrangement. So listen to this one. It's called 500 Vials.
When we poke ya, well, we know you're gonna be safe from COVID infecting you. When you go out, yeah, I know you're gonna hug and not worry it might kill you. And we will shoot 500 vials and we will stick 500 more just to be the vax who shoots 500 vials. What are you waiting for?
Like, what has happened to people?
What has happened? I mean, and my favourite Late Show segment was the Jon Stewart segment.
Oh, yeah.
Where he basically shamed Stephen Colbert. And you could see Stephen Colbert not knowing what to say. Because here was Jon Stewart doing two cardinal things that these hosts are not anymore: being really funny and being really informative and fresh. Actually, being fresh, rather, having a fresh take on something. And it's not that fresh, actually.
Yeah, and by the way, it's not that fresh. I mean, everyone's, a lot of people on the right are getting very excited about Jon Stewart, and here's a little piece of Jon Stewart talking about the Wuhan Virology Institute.
What do you mean by that? Do you mean like there's a chance that this was created in a lab, there's an investigation?
A chance?
Well, but
oh my
if there was
God.
evidence, I'd love to hear it.
There's
I just don't know.
a novel respiratory coronavirus overtaking Wuhan, China. What do we do? Oh, you know who we could ask? The Wuhan Novel Respiratory Coronavirus Lab. The disease is the same name as the lab. That's just a little too weird, don't you think? And then they ask the scientists, they're like, how did this... So wait a minute, you work at the Wuhan Respiratory Coronavirus Lab. How did this happen? And they're like, a pangolin kissed a turtle. And you're like, no, the name of your lab. If you look at the name, let me see your business card. Show me your business card. Oh, I work at the coronavirus lab in Wuhan. Oh, because there's a coronavirus loose in Wuhan. How did that happen? Maybe a bat flew into the cloaca of a turkey and then it sneezed into my chili and now we all have coronavirus. Like, come on.
Wait a second.
What about this?
Wait a second.
Listen to this.
Wait a second.
All right.
John.
Oh my God. There's been an outbreak of chocolatey goodness near Hershey, Pennsylvania. What do you think happened? Like, oh, I don't know. Maybe a steam shovel mated with a cocoa bean. Or it's the chocolate factory. Maybe that's it.
That could be.
So good for Jon Stewart, yeah? But I'll tell you what my problem with that is. A little bit late there, Jon Stewart.
Yeah.
You're so cool, Jon Stewart. You know what? I bet you had that thought... Well, let me say, a year ago. You know what? Let's not even go that far. Let's say 6 months ago. But you know what? Who was the president of the United States who shared your opinion, by the way, Jon Stewart? But you were not willing. You hadn't got the courage. And by the way, that's what's lacking, is courage, bravery. Where are you? So you're not that brave, Jon Stewart. You're not that impressed.
No.
And all the right, as I said, getting very excited about Jon Stewart saying that the Wuhan Virology Lab is actually where the Wuhan flu probably came from, is not a stretch, is what he's saying. And it's like, whatever.
Yeah.
So now, by the way, we are going to go to our fabulous interview that we did earlier with Lionel Shriver, who is one of our favourite authors and very interesting, and also, interestingly, a lockdown skeptic. We're going to go over to that right now. So we're joined now by the author, essayist and lockdown skeptic, Lionel Shriver, who won the Orange Prize for Fiction for We Need to Talk About Kevin, about the aftermath of a school shooting, which was adapted into a Hollywood movie starring Tilda Swinton. Her latest book is called Should We Stay or Should We Go, which has just been published. It's a story of a couple who make a suicide pact in their 50s. And the novel follows what happens to them, or more precisely, 12 versions of what happens next. Welcome, Lionel.
It's nice to talk to you again.
Yeah. By the way, I just realized, I looked up my notes. The last time we talked to you was a year ago, and we talked all COVID all the time. And that was actually my first question to you. You stayed in the UK for the whole of the pandemic. Did you not? Were you not tempted? Were you not tempted to come to the US, to the land of the free?
Ish.
Well, I have finally. I mean, here I am in Brooklyn. And I have to say, I am not missing the UK.
Has this changed your attitude to the UK? Because I have to say, this pandemic changed my attitude to Ireland.
Yes, it has changed my attitude. It's made me much more hostile. I wouldn't have characterized myself as hostile in the slightest to begin with.
Yeah.
And I don't enjoy this change at all.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
No.
And it's made me more hostile toward Ireland. I completely understand your change of heart.
Yeah.
And also toward Australia and New Zealand.
Yes.
Yeah.
In Canada.
In Canada.
The Anglosphere has not distinguished itself.
No.
Only certain states in the
That's
US
correct.
distinguish themselves.
Yeah.
Correct.
No, Anne says if she went home to Ireland in the last few months, it's not a doctor she would need, it's a lawyer.
Yeah, I would have worried that would have got arrested, you know, because I know from friends there, and we haven't experienced it. You know, we had a touch of it at the beginning here in California, and it was bad and dystopian, and was like living in a dystopia, which kind of was weird, right, and kind of interesting maybe for 3 weeks. And then we kind of came out of that super dystopian reality. But I know that that's not what happened in Ireland and in the UK, where people were randomly stopped by police officers, you know, grown-ups stopped by police officers and asked questions about their travel, or
the essentialness of their travel.
Why are you going there? You know, you need to turn around. My friend just went back to France the other day, and at the airport in Dublin, this is just the other day in Dublin, you know, the police are at the airport she said she felt that they were intentionally intimidating, and they were very gruff with her. And they said, you know, why are you going there? Where are you going? Why are you going there? Like this kind of tone. And she felt it was intentional.
Well, I'm afraid that we have scratched the surface of liberal democracy to discover the same authoritarian instincts as everywhere else. And it turns out that we walk around, or previous to spring 2020, we walked around imagining that we had these inalienable rights.
Yeah.
And there were limits to what the government could do to us. There were limits to what the police could stop us for. There aren't, apparently.
Yeah.
Yep.
And liberal democracy can change the law whenever it suits.
Yes.
And you can live in a state of de facto totalitarianism indefinitely.
Yeah.
Just as anywhere else. So I'm disillusioned, not just with the UK and Ireland and down under, etc. But in some ways, I'm disillusioned with the whole human race, which makes it difficult to know where to go next.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things, it's funny, my sister sent me a book at the beginning of the pandemic, and it was about a Polish hero, whatever, who allowed himself to be arrested when the Jews were being rounded up in Poland. And he then kept a diary about it. And one of the big takeouts was that he said that they rounded up a huge number of people, and put them into like a stadium. And the thing that struck him most was the fact that everyone was so polite. The people who were rounded up, the Jewish people, were all so civil and polite. And we've had a version of that, because if everyone in the stadium had fought back, he made the point, if everyone in the stadium had said no, that the number of guards were insufficient to have overpowered them. And surely that was the case here, where everyone was so complicit, everyone was so polite. What happened to us? What's wrong with us?
We are a fearful species at a fearful time.
Yes.
And,
yes.
Also, we're especially prey now to a kind of self-congratulatory communitarianism, which is very bossy and superior. They don't want to give them up because it's a claim to moral superiority.
Yes. I mean,
and also it gives you the right to boss other people around and express contempt for them.
Yeah.
I mean, that first came home to me when we started doing work on the environmental movement, actually, because we started, asking, slightly difficult questions about the environmental movement because we experienced its dark side in Eastern Europe. And I was very, very surprised by the overreaction of people to these simple questions. And I realized it wasn't about the environment. It was the environment. Being an environmentalist back then was one of the ways people felt that it showed they were a good person.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a bit like wearing masks. And with that, environmentalism is perfectly suited to this. It proves you're a good person, but also allows you to boss other people for the good of the planet. And the mask wearing is just an extent. Everyone's an environmentalist now, even Boris Johnson. Environmentalism is just the same as this. It's virtue signaling plus it allows you to be nasty to other people.
Well, that's the point. In some ways, virtue signaling is poorly named, because you're signaling a great deal more than virtue. I question whether it really has anything to do with genuine goodness.
Yes, you're very correct. I mean, Actually, I want to get on to the book now because
I want to get
it
on
kind
to
of
the
brings in. You talked
Yeah,
about.
we could go on for hours on this.
Yeah, well,
no, we really could, but actually,
I'm still living in a state of sustained rage.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah.
And I think obviously, I mean, when you were writing the book, obviously, COVID comes into the book, and I think it's
Well,
go on, sorry.
Go ahead. You talked about you're now disillusioned with the human race, and we're a fearful species, and it's a fearful time. I mean, this book is about disillusionment in some ways with the human race, or with.
No, I don't agree with that.
Well, the two characters are they're scared. They're scared about the future. They're scared about their future. They're disillusioned. They think it's only all downhill.
Can I just interrupt Phelim and say it's not they. Cyril is different than his wife, and I think that they're very different people. And if he hadn't come up with the idea, I don't know. She wasn't coming up with that idea on her own.
Okay, we need to tell people what the book is about. Okay. Yes. So the book is called. What's the book called, Anne?
The book is called Should We Stay or Should We Go?
Show it there.
And here's the book here.
And it's available on Amazon and all good bookstores.
We highly recommend it. It's a great read. And basically, it's about a couple who, in their 50s, decide. Well, it's the husband's idea that when when it comes to the wife's 80th birthday, that the two of them will top themselves. That they'll both take some kind of a potion, and they'll take these pills that he then deposits in the fridge and keeps as a kind of a frightening. Every time you open the fridge, like it's almost like, I don't know. Every time you open the fridge, there's these pills there that they're going to do. But then there's 12 versions of what happens.
It's kind of like sliding doors, or what's it? Sliding doors. It's a novelistic version of sliding doors where due to little changes, the story is told different ways, 12 different times. Well,
I think first of all, I mean, the two characters are very different in their attitude, and I think that's kind of, I think it's, by the way, it's bizarrely, this is a funny book, actually. It's very entertaining. It's also very frightening, though, and I know I've read a bit about what your inspiration for writing this book, Lionel, and I know that your family, you're watching your own parents get old. We are not watching our parents getting old anymore because they're not with us anymore, but that was the starting point, right?
It was a book that was most of all inspired by a remark by a friend of mine who said, when she was already about 60 at the time, that she had no desire to live beyond the age of 80. And I immediately wondered what she would do if she does turn 80. Is she going to be proactive about it? Or is this just a whimsy that will come and go and she'll put up with anything like everyone else? So and because, God laughs at our plans, the other possibility it throws up is that you may have these intentions, but your life could go many other different directions. Yeah. And hence the parallel universe structure, which I have used once before, although in the post-birthday world, it was going back and forth between only two different realities. And this one instead explores a dozen different possibilities as to how this vow of my couple's works out, including at least 2 or 3 more speculative fiction scenarios.
Yes.
So that they become, when they have terminal diagnoses, they become cryogenically preserved and wake up. You have no idea how many hundreds of years hence. Yes. And in another, there's a
wonder drug
cure for aging, and everyone looks 25 and lives forever.
And actually, there's a very frightening scenario. One of the scenarios is extremely frightening. It's the one where, and I actually want to ask you about it. In one of the scenarios, there are children who are not impressive. Let's be honest. There are children who are not impressive, but particularly one of the children who is a very recognizable character, by the way, unfortunately in life, basically has the parents locked up, has them, locked up for their own good. And
they're committed.
They're committed. Because can I ask you guys one question? Because it's a very frightening, I found that extremely frightening, that part of the book. Is that in any way close to anything that could possibly happen anywhere in the world now?
At the moment?
Yes, of course, it can happen easily. and it can happen in the UK. And I included a detail, which is historically accurate, that during the coronavirus restrictions, Boris Johnson signed off on making it possible for you to commit your parents with only one doctor's signature. And so the story in the book is totally plausible. Now, it's true that I committed them to the worst care home in the universe.
Yes.
Yes.
So I made it as bad as possible, and it's a deliberate allusion to Nurse Ratched and
Yes.
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 And I loved you have several versions of names of places people could end up at the end of their lives. And all of them I loved. Very, very humorous names for different ones. I have to say, my own mother, that was her big fear in life. Her biggest, really big fear in life was that she'd end up somewhere like that. Because of privacy and, communal everything and all of that. And she didn't, by the way, she didn't. But my mother died at the age of 86. My father lived to be 95. And it brings up kind of that issue that, obviously the number 80 was very arbitrary and that gets discussed a lot in the book.
yeah.
But this idea that quite a lot of people, I think that there's some research on this, that nowadays actually we are getting to live longer, but we are also getting to live better longer. Right?
That's the question. How much of this book is based on the latest research, or how much of it is based on the fear that we all have that may be not based on
the
reality?
worst possible scenario.
The reason I'm asking is because we went to the Battle of Ideas, a conference you know very well. I think you've even spoken at it several times. Yeah, and we listened to Raymond Tallis. He's a geriatric specialist, a wonderful speaker, a wonderful person. He wrote the books Clinical Neurology of Old Age and Textbook of Geriatric Medicine and Gerontology. And basically, it was a wonderful speech, one of the best, just made me think freshly about something. And his, the way he ended it was, that you minuet to the last minute. And he said, at the University of Norwich, they say, bop till you drop. That because of new advances in medicine, the fear of this long decline where you're a burden is not the reality and not based on latest data. So I just wonder, you don't have to accept that, and of course everyone's experience, everyone's data is local. All data is local. So if your parents are in that situation, it doesn't matter that there's vast improvement in the rest of the universe. How much of it was based on the fear that we all have of that, and how much did you do much research on it? And tell me about your thought process.
Well, any statistics quoted in the book are accurate. So to that extent, it's based on research, but of course that's not the purpose of the book.
Yeah.
And we may be looking at some larger averages beginning to shift, and we're not just extending old age, but also somewhat expanding healthy old age, and that's all to the good. But just on an anecdotal level, there are a lot of anecdotes.
Yes.
So let's get real.
Yes.
I'm sure that sounds like a very nice speech, and it is all very encouraging for our futures. But the exceptions are vast.
Yes.
Including my own parents. So, my mother is blind. She can't walk. She's losing her cognitive capacity. She's had a stroke. She can't move her right hand. We can't really communicate anymore. She is not the person I knew my whole life. And she talks about dying. Actually, one of the most moving things I've heard her say, though she hasn't said this much with this much content in years, is that she doesn't want to die, but she needs to die. And she does. That it's her body is living on, but her existence, as I have always understood it, is unrecognizable to me. And by the way, there is a chapter in the book that explores the possibility that being demented, for example, is a riotously good time. It may be a little crying for the people around you, but my character experiences being released from what we understand as reality as a kind of endless picture montage. Like
I actually really
loved
loved that.
Your computer screensaver, and it's just really fun, walking through all her memories and coming up with all these images in a sort of dreamlike intoxication. So I know that when we're younger, we look at older people and often think, oh my God, I don't want to be like that, but maybe it's not as bad as we think.
And also in your defense, also, you do have one, I think at least one scenario where they live to a healthy, wealthy, ripe old age and have kind of a second life and a third act as well.
It's the not knowing. It's the not knowing is obviously one of the problems. But I really like that section about the when she was demented and she was actually fine. I remember visiting a friend, a woman I really adored her from my hometown, and she had dementia and she went into one of these homes, and I remember thinking, I have to go and see her, and I didn't want to go and see her, and I really didn't, and I felt so sorry for myself, and I was just miserable, and poor Kathleen, and I was so upset about it. And then I went to see her and she was exactly the way you described. She had lost literally all of the lines in her face were gone.
Yeah.
She was really smooth faced and she smiled like beatifically. She looked gorgeous and she talked complete nonsense. And I remember feeling really good leaving her because I remember thinking, all I cared was that she wasn't unhappy. And I thought, I need to get over myself. She is delighted with herself. And she was blissful. And maybe, so sometimes it's in the eye of the beholder, but I think an awful lot of this book is about the fear of what might happen. And you've said that you're in favor of euthanasia, and in fact, if anything, you'd be in favor of a very big loosening of the requirements, where they have, I think at the moment, something like 3 sign-offs by a doctor and all this. You'd actually want to make it really easy for people to have a medically assisted suicide.
I probably wouldn't go so far as really easy, but I would say easier. I say I'm pro euthanasia. It's not as if I want little booths on every corner. I would like to see it be an option if people are suffering or take no joy in their lives or have in some way decayed in a way that is unacceptable to them. The truth of the matter is that we worry, I think, unnecessarily about abuse of such laws. The truth is that very few people take advantage of that opportunity. If you will, even in the places where assisted death has been legalized and they are regarded as, heavy users, on a big statistical level, a very small fraction of the population is heading for the exit deliberately.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I try to acknowledge in this book is on the face of it, lack of realism about the couple's vow to begin with, because not only are they just choosing a number without acknowledging, what kind of condition they might be in when they reach that magic birthday. But there's a huge drive, animal drive, in all of us to remain alive.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I think that when we're younger and we're contemplating these things abstractly, we tend to underappreciate just how deep that drive is. There's one chapter in which Cyril is about to go through with it. His wife has gone first, and
Mm-hmm.
he just can't do it. He cannot do it. There's a welling up in him of what do you mean? A kind of overwhelming self-regard and ambition that doesn't necessarily stop when you get old. So, this is not I hope this is an entertaining book.
Yes.
Yes.
The name's overwhelmingly to entertain.
Yeah.
That's
Yes.
purpose.
No. Yes. We should.
But it's not a simplistic book.
No.
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 No,
It's entertaining, but it brings you.
Euthanasia, and she wants to kill all the old people.
No.
No.
Yeah, I mean that's one. I mean, it's a complex book, and it'd be hard to read this book and know what your beliefs are about euthanasia. I mean, we only know because we've listened to interviews by you, but really, it would be hard to guess which of the 12 scenarios you would like or you think is right for people. You know, it's not written in a preachy, and it is very funny and it is very entertaining, and they're a very entertaining and nice couple and funny and witty, and you give them different paths and that. Just to go back, I don't want to stick too long on the euthanasia aspect of it or the dark side of it, but has your openness to euthanasia, has it, you probably wrote, did you write this during COVID or did you write most of it before COVID?
I started it before COVID. I started in December of 2019.
Yeah. So has your you know, for want of a better word, pro euthanasia or easier access to euthanasia views, have they changed since you realized what the government can do in terms of healthcare, in terms of the authoritarianism and telling you what to do and really being in total control? Has it made you more wary of that, or do you think that there's no connection there?
No, I don't think there's a movement in the West toward, government mandated euthanasia. If anything, what we're dealing with is the reverse. That is such a sentimentality about life and its preservation at any cost that we will ruin everyone's lives in order to save them. So that's really much more the danger we're dealing with here than government getting impatient with its citizens living too long and dispatching. I just don't think that's going to happen.
But I suppose it's not. I wasn't asking more about the government. It's just, as you see, the government will do anything to for your own good,
Yes.
and encourage others to do things for your own good, and it becomes part of the accepted. I mean, the British population have accepted, authoritarianism for their own good. They've accepted the destruction of their own economy, and they're active in the destruction of their own economy and their own future for their own good. And I would just be worried that attitude, it's more of an attitude than a diktat, that attitude and the authoritarianism that would come of it I wondered how it made you think twice about health and society, and made you more wary of allowing a medical, allowing doctors to have more power than they have, or more ability to interfere.
Yes, I am much more alert to health authoritarianism, and I had not realized quite the degree to which it is this for your own good reasoning that we're going to lose control over our lives. We are apparently, we have now made a contract with government that our health is their business.
Yeah.
And, you can trace this further back to the whole anti-smoking. It's moved on to anti-salt, anti-sugar, all these petty little regulations. Also the anti-obesity movement.
Anti-alcohol.
And the anti-alcohol. They've been fiddling at the edges of our ability to make decisions for ourselves for some time now. And it's only a short hop, skip, and jump from manipulating the tax situation to outright coercion. After all, cigarettes in some states have become so expensive that it's right next door to making them illegal.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I used to smoke, and every time I see the price of cigarettes now, I just can't believe it. It's unbelievable how expensive they are. It's really shocking. What question?
Well,
is there,
I mean, we should say the novel is fun, right? I mean, I know the conversation has tended to.
I mean, just because of what's going on right now, it's very easy to get diverted into the consequences of COVID, and it is true that looking forward, we have invited a degree of control over our lives that we never contemplated before, and governments are not going to let that control go. No. So
one of the
I am dismayed, and that is not in the main what this book is about. I should tell you, I found it personally amusing that when I started this book, I wanted the novel to take place in as contemporary a context as possible. So, of course, there's one date from which all of these scenarios spring or in some ways are designed around, and that is Kay's 80th birthday. So I decided I would choose the 29th of March, 2020.
Yes.
Which was about 3 months out from when I started the book. So I was setting this crucial date in my own future. And I just thought, it's only 3 months.
What can happen?
What could happen?
Oh God, that's funny.
So what happened is, we just got, nuked by COVID. Yeah. And I had to go back and do some rewriting, and because I hadn't yet finished the first draft, I just started incorporating COVID. It's not a COVID book, I would emphasize.
Yeah, no, it's not a COVID book.
I want to be clear.
Really sick of lockdown novels, and this is not a lockdown novel.
No, it's not a lockdown novel. And by the way, it's not even a government control of healthcare. The government has very little role in this book.
No, we're totally off message here.
We're wandering off the reservation.
No, it's very much about Actually, it's very much about relationships. It's very much about a marriage. And actually, the picture of the marriage, by the way, is really, really wonderful, beautiful,
Thank you.
Very, very tender. I really, really appreciated that. I actually, and by the way, you made me, which I think is a great gift. I laughed out loud, like I guffawed a number of times. I particularly love the scene, by the way, so Cyril is a very interesting character. I kind of, he's obnoxious. Like, well, the minute I hear that he's kind of a religiously devoted Guardian reader, I mean, it immediately gets my, pardon?
He's a type. You're not.
He's a type. But then he saves himself. Just when he's been, you're really angry about that. And then he saves himself because then COVID comes along, and he's a super COVID skeptic because he's a doctor, and which doesn't actually qualify him, by the way, to be good on this issue, because obviously so many doctors have been really appalling. But actually, he's very much a lockdown skeptic and very much on the data, and he's very good on that. But the scene that I loved was where he got his beer. I think he got his bitter beer, and he was sitting there expecting a different result.
For Brexit.
For the more recent
Boris national election
for the national election, where Boris obviously swept the boards, and he was expecting Labour to do much better. And I just thought that was really funny, and that he had kind of the beer sitting there. And of course, because you knew the situation, it made it even funnier. That made me think one thing about the novel, that it's very British in terms of its references. I just wondered, was that?
Yeah, I mean, it's set in Britain and it has British characters, but I think that most Americans are not going to have any trouble.
No,
I mean, over here we watch so much of British television.
Yeah.
That even the vernacular from across the pond is starting to penetrate. A lot of Americans are not aware of where the lingo comes from, but the big distinction we used to draw between American and British slang is now quite blurred. There's a lot of intermingling.
Yeah.
So, there's occasionally going to be reference to an organization that you're not going to recognize, but
yeah,
for the most part, it's completely discernible. I'm not
Yes.
trying to be.
Yeah, it's really wonderful. I love the method you use of having the 12 different stories, because in the end you're kind of like, you know, which one. And actually, funny enough, the one where they discover, in one of the versions, they discover a drug that keeps people young forever. That's actually pretty much that's as frightening almost as the one where they're locked up. In some ways, you know, it's kind of funny at the beginning, and then you realize, oh God, what happens here? You know, everyone's the same age, and children are like, yeah, having a problem, their parents being the same age as them.
Yeah. So, actually, from a personal point of view, I mean, you've obviously got a very interesting life. I mean, how do you feel? I mean, do you not want to hang on? Do you not want to hang on to life?
To see what happens next.
I mean,
well, that's one of the questions one chapter in particular asks. In that one, the couple do not kill themselves at 80 and become, oh gosh, I think they cross 100 in that one too.
Yes, they do. Yes, that's correct.
It's about the middle of this century. And that's when an awful lot of problems, according to my homework, peak. One of which is migration due to both climate change and just population growth in Africa and Middle East. And Europe is overwhelmed. It's really, and there's also this big youth, local anarchist movement that has just decided life sucks, there is no future, burn everything down. And so between the two movements, basically it's the end of Western civilization. And I'm asking, I might have my characters try to answer this question at the end of that chapter. But for me, it's posing the question, you know, if all the things I worry about really do come to pass and everything falls apart by about 2050, do I want to be around to watch it? I mean, theoretically, if I lived as long as my paternal grandfather did, I will be around to watch it. Or would I rather bow out earlier and, you know, embrace ignorance as bliss? In fact, that's the name of the chapter, Ignorance as bliss. And I find that question very difficult to answer. I am curious. I do feel invested in a number of stories. In fact, there's a metaphor in the book where the wife, when they're facing one more time whether or not they should go through it, she says, I feel as if I'm in the middle of all these novels and suddenly, you know, I am expected to return them to the library. And she means, you know, newspaper stories, what's happening at any given time. And there's always something happening. So yeah, I am curious, but I have a feeling there are limits to that curiosity. And those limits probably come into play when my curiosity is at odds with my physical comfort.
Your ability to be curious. Yes. Yeah.
I'm only going to be really curious if I can still buy a chicken and a bottle of wine.
Yeah. So here's a question. As you were exploring all these different scenarios, did your own opinions change? You know, because most people don't want to think about this. Most people don't think about this. You've had to think about it a lot. You've presented 12 different scenarios. Some of them very realistic, some of them probably less so. But did your opinions change, or did it harden your opinions, or you just don't know what do you think now? I mean, and did it change?
I think the main thing that shifted slightly is a greater appreciation for the number of compromises even someone like me is willing to make in order to stick around. A fuller appreciation for that life force we were talking about earlier. The bottom line is, I think you have to be really suffering in order to choose nothing over something.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
The nothing has to seem like a merciful way out.
Yeah.
And I have been in physical pain enough. I don't think emotional pain will quite do it, but physical pain sure will. And I think there is a point at which if you could press a button to make it stop, even if you wouldn't be here anymore, you will press the button. But it has to be serious agony, and there has to be very little offer of reprieve.
Mm-hmm.
So in some ways, writing the book made me feel less of an exception, more just like everybody else. I mean, the book starts out, and in the first chapter, Kay, the wife, is saying, you and I don't want to end up like, my father, who in the book was demented for 10 years and unrecognizable. And everyone, vows they don't want to end up in a care home. And then they end up in a care home. Of course they do. And they end up putting up with all the indignities that they vowed they wouldn't. And I guess through the process of the book, I came to recognize I'm exactly the same way. I like to think of myself as someone who has standards and, very physically active and wouldn't put up with this, that, and the other thing. And the truth is that I probably will.
Okay. Well, I mean, by the way, I just want to emphasize again that the book Should We Stay or Should We Go by Lionel Shriver is not a downer, right? It's funny.
No,
it's
not.
entertaining.
I had a wonderful time writing this book.
Yes.
Very good.
I was constantly laughing out loud over the keyboard.
Yeah.
And I think it's the structure. I mean, if it had just been about a couple who have made it to suicide pact and then just have to decide whether to go through with it.
Yeah. God, that would.
I think that could be just pretty grim.
Yes. Actually,
right.
Very true.
But the structure allows the reader to. You can lose a character or lose both of them. You turn the page and then you've got them back again. So there's not a sense of the inevitable, or there's nothing is permanent. So it's a game. It's fun, and it's intended to be fun.
Yes, you draw people very, very well, Lionel. I mean, the children are magnificent. Their grown-up children are really magnificent in the most awful possible way.
Well, two of them are unbearable.
But they're very recognizable, unfortunately. Unfortunately, we've all lived long enough to have met a few of these people. They really are. Yeah, they're pretty awful. Although the eldest son, actually, who's just a boring guy who does, works and is successful and, is whatever. Like, he's actually pretty much the best. But like the youngest daughter, who's, sort of imaginative and creative and dramatic, basically, and always looking for a dramatic, so that she'll be a witness to something that she can then further dramatize when she retells it to other people. But basically, that's her big takeout of things. And then the middle guy, who is really horrific, who basically, and by the way, who doesn't know those people, who's smacking his lips around the corners of his parents' life, hoping for an inheritance that will help him avoid ever having to do anything real.
Right.
Your children in your books now, from Kevin to the children in this book are
I loved them. I loved those children. I love the children that you drew, because these are real people. Sorry, now these are very real people, the children that she drew. Unfortunately, but brilliantly, absolutely brilliantly. So we highly recommend the book to people. Yeah, we highly recommend
it's very funny. It's very entertaining.
And it's thought-provoking.
And the characters are very, very entertaining.
Very believable. Very, very well written. Okay, so we highly recommend that. So listen, Lionel, it's been great chatting to you again. And hopefully we will see you and meet before too long, because I think we have a lot to talk about. Particularly all of that craziness that we're just living through. God, you just got Well, did your reason for leaving the UK right now, was that part of it? Was part of it based on Boris's extension?
No, I always come to Brooklyn for the summer. So this is just me in my usual migratory pattern, although it was more difficult to execute than usual. And had I been a British national, I would not have been allowed in the country.
That's correct.
As we know, we know that we had Katie Hopkins was on our podcast recently, and she had come to America and done a speaking tour. And basically, to come into America, she had to go to Mexico for 2 weeks. She went to some random guy called Alejandro, on a beach, paid him off, and got herself a certification that said she had a negative PCR test and whatever. And then she got in. And the idea, by the way, that that's legal, it's so mad and crazy, that you can come from Mexico, but you can't come directly from the UK.
Well, yeah, we're not American citizens, so we can leave, but we can't get back in.
Yeah, right now. But they're going to change it.
It's patently absurd because they're making you take all these tests all the time.
Yep.
If the tests work, then why can't any Brit take a test and then get on a plane and be allowed in the country?
Yep.
And then furthermore, the chances are that Brit has been double vaccinated.
Yep.
Yes.
Doesn't count for anything.
So the vaccinations obviously don't work according to the authorities.
Well, we are constantly forcing people, effectively forcing people to get vaccinated, certainly forcing them to have these tests all the time. And at the same time, the rules imply that the vaccinations don't work and the tests are inaccurate.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
No, okay.
It's
why are we going through this theater if all of it is fake?
It's theater.
One of the things that makes travel difficult for me right now is that my blood pressure goes up and I'm prone to rages.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's very dangerous in
yes.
No, that's not good. Yes.
Yes.
Yes. You can get arrested for that in Europe now.
Yeah.
Being angry.
Yeah.
All right. Listen, Lionel, thank you so much for your time today. We really, really appreciate it. And again, we're going to be recommending the book and telling people every place where they can get it. Highly recommend Lionel Shriver. Should we stay or should we go? Thanks so much, Lionel.
Okay. Pleasure to talk to you.
Right. Okay.
Bye.
I have to say, I don't share her, optimism, if that's the right word, optimism. I think I have a major problem with euthanasia for a start, as a concept, but even in her calling for loosening of the rules, they will be abused by bad people, they will be used by bad doctors, and the government, when you have government-run healthcare, the government are going to say, well, something has to give.
Yeah.
And it's going to be under enormous pressure. Old people are going to be under enormous pressure to do the right thing for the community. And
and what about climate change, Phil?
Yes.
Yeah, because there'll be too many old people that'll be taken up using, creating carbon or whatever, or some excuse that they would have to, do a cull of the population. So I don't like, and I also don't, in general, I'm 100,000% against euthanasia in every form. I think human life is sacred and it came from the Creator, and the Creator will decide when to take it back. And I thought one of the things I meant to say this when Lionel was on, and I didn't, but I kept thinking when I was reading her book as well about Dylan Thomas's poem, Do Not Go Gentle, Into the Good Night, Rage, Rage Against the Dying of the Light. And here's a little piece of that might be good for people after thinking so much about euthanasia during that interview to listen to a little bit of Dylan Thomas reciting his own wonderful poem.
Do not go gentle into that good night. Old age should burn and rave at close of day. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. Though wise men at their end know dark is right, because their words had forked no lightning, they do not go gentle into that good night. Grave men near death, who see with blinding sight, blind eyes could blaze like meteors and be gay. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. And you, my father, there on the sad height, curse, bless me now with your fierce tears, I pray. Do not go gentle into that good night. Rage, rage against the dying of the light.
In Lionel's defense, by the way, she does offer, as we've talked, other alternatives rather than euthanasia, and some of them are successful and some of them are not.
And I think the book, actually, funny enough, I think what the book actually in the end says, and I think she kind of said that as well, was that, when it comes to it, who's going to be brave enough to say, I don't want to hang around to see what happens next?
She says, people do really rage against the dying of the light. It's amazing how people cling to life. So as I said there, it's not easy to pinpoint her political persuasion from that book, which is a good sign of the book, actually.
Yes, it's a good sign of her too, actually, by the way, that she's a very free thinker, very independent thinker. But from that to this next story, which I just think I just love this. I mean, so every day now, it sort of feels to me like, you start looking online, you look at stories that have come up, and basically every day we find out that Trump was right. Trump was right. Trump was right. Like about everything. Like it's almost like a joke at this point. Basically, as we just said, like Jon Stewart, it's basically Jon Stewart came on to say Trump was right. Of course, he doesn't have the courage to say that.
Yes.
But if he had any courage, he would say, and by the way, the orange man was right. But this one I love, by the way, Philip. So I saw this in the Daily Mail and I just thought it was great. And here's the headline from the Daily Mail. Trump was right. Again, California will spend $500 million this year of our taxpayer money to thin its 33 million acres of forests to lessen the chance of wildfires after the former president was laughed at in 2018 for suggesting raking the woodland floor. So basically, Trump said this way back in 2018, and now guess what California are doing?
And then we thought we'd do a little list of everything else that Trump was right about. He was right about being skeptical about masks.
Yep.
Studies have now shown. He was right about hydroxychloroquine. Studies have now shown it's 20% more effective than other methods of combating COVID. He was right about Israel. Since he's come out of power, Israel has been a mess. He was right about the Israel peace accords to isolate the Palestinians and make peace with the Arab world. He was right about, as we said, about the virus coming from a Chinese lab. He was right that Lafayette Square in Washington, D.C. was not cleared for a photo op. They did not use tear gas for a photo op. He was right. Remember the famous Russian bounties that the Russians were putting out bounties on their soldiers? That was fake. He said they would produce vaccines before 2020.
That's right.
He was right about that. I mean, the New York Times actually had a graphic showing that the production of rollout of vaccines was unlikely before 2035. He was right that blue state lockdowns didn't work. He was right that schools should be opened. He was right that his strategy for the border was the best one. He was right. And everyone admits this now. Everyone else admits this now. But they were so involved in hatred and so anti-journalist and so anti-information that they just could not they could not tell you that black was black and white was white because Trump said black was black and white was white.
Because Trump derangement syndrome drove people completely nuts and they became completely irrational.
So, Texas, what a wonderful state, Anne. Yeah, we're all moving to Texas. Are we all moving to Texas, Anne?
Well, there was a time when you think, you know what, we'll move to Texas. You're always safe in Texas. Well, you know what? Not so much, really, actually. I think we all should have learned something really disturbing about Texas this year. So you'll remember, and we covered it here a lot, what happened with the blackout in Texas in February. Really, really shocking. And of course, unprecedented weather, it was really cold, whatever. But anyway, basically the electrical grid fell to pieces and people were plunged into darkness and into cold and into no water for, at least 48 hours. And it was extraordinary, right? And in fact, if anything, from people that we interviewed, like experts in the energy field, our friend John Harpole and Robert Bryce, both of them basically saying that they were minutes away. Texas was minutes away from having a total blackout where the whole state would have been completely blacked out. Instead of that, they were able to reassign energy into different places, so everywhere didn't have a total blackout. But here's the extraordinary thing, right? So this terrible thing happened in Texas. People died, including a child, and I know there's extenuating circumstances that people wrote to us about and all of that, but people died. The whole of Texas was in an incredibly dangerous situation. Friends of ours stuck in a hotel in Austin for days on end with their child, nothing to eat. Really awful, awful situation. And here's the headline on Fox 4, which I think is a local affiliate, Fox affiliate in Texas. The Fox 4 affiliate in Texas have tried to get ERCOT, who are the not-for-profit in charge of the electrical grid in Texas, to tell them what happened.
The government not-for-profit.
The government not-for-profit. To get them to say what happened. Like, just tell us what happened.
To release their records.
And to release all the records.
Yes.
No, exactly. To release all the records, to be totally transparent. How did this happen?
Under the Freedom of Information Act, yeah.
So they're asking for this vital information that will be made public so that the public can work out, what they think about everything. And guess what ERCOT have decided to say? ERCOT have said, no, they won't. They will not release any of the records from the February grid failure.
And they're using a kind of a loophole, rather than try and be transparent, they're using every little piece of law and comma to stop, to prevent themselves from having to release it. And the Attorney General has supported it. This is this is
scary, by the way.
This is scary.
This is scary because, even if
Freedom of Information Acts, as journalists, we love them, right? They're a difficult thing for governments to handle sometimes, because sometimes it's probably better that governments would talk frankly in private to come to a decision. But when you've got something as important as this, you really should be then 6 months later releasing all the documents,
But they should want it. They should even want it themselves, because this needs to be something that's scrutinized by the public. Like, what decisions did they make? What information did they have? How did it happen? How much time was there? How close did they come to total blackout? Exactly who was in charge? Who was making the decisions? Did they make the decisions?
Yep.
Had they done simulations before? There's a number of questions, because if it happened once, it can happen again. And by the way, of course, and then that just happens to segue beautifully into the fact that they've just recently had another kind of crisis where now it's warm, it's really hot in Texas, and so they've been pleading with consumers to put their thermostat up so that the AC doesn't come on as easily.
So that because of fear of blackout, because Texas has windmills that won't work in hot weather, and they have solar panels that just can't make air conditioning work the way they should. So they've under-resourced their energy production, and now in a heat wave they can't cope. So they're asking people to turn off their thermostats and turn them up or down or whatever it is to use less energy. And people,
it's kind of crazy.
And what's happened then?
What's happened then is there's a kind of an slightly unfair headline in the Daily Mail, but it's not that unfair, by the way. So the headline in the Mail is: Texas residents say the temperatures on their smart thermostats were raised overnight without their permission after state's power operators warned of shortages amid a heatwave. Now, you dig into that story a bit more, and it's actually not as clear. It's not exactly what they say. However, I still think it's scary. So the truth is that people were encouraged to get these smart thermostats in their homes. And, while they were doing that and signing all the paperwork, there was like this one provision basically where you could sign in, you could sign
opt in
to a provision which would allow the electricity utility to remotely control your electricity. They were going to allow that, and so people signed into that, but they kind of didn't realize what they were signing until they recently, they were getting up
until they woke up at 4 o'clock in the morning
and said,
sweating.
What's going on here? And realized that someone had come in. And so while those thermostats, those smart thermostats, might sound like a great idea to you, please be careful of what you're signing and what you're buying into, because you could be buying into a situation where you don't have, you're not going to have them anymore.
So listen, let's get on to the Irish Times. So yes, sometimes newspapers, you see headlines either online or on newspaper, and you think that's either Babylon Bee or The Onion, but you think
that can't be right.
Or it's ironic, or because no serious journalist actually the whole story is ludicrous, but no serious journalist would write it without saying, wow, this is a strange irony. I mean, so here's the headline. So the Irish Prime Minister is called Leo Varadkar. Actually, he's the Deputy Prime Minister now, but he was the Prime Minister. But Leo Varadkar, and the headline is, Varadkar guarantees abortions will take place in new maternity hospital. Right, so he's guaranteed. So he was under a lot of pressure. There was according to this framing, there was an outcry and an outrage that abortions might not take place in the new maternity hospital. And the reporter writing that, the sub-editor writing that, had just didn't see anything strange in that, and no one has. It was a few days ago, and no one has said this.
Is it an oxymoron?
Yeah,
is that what it is?
Oh,
I think that's what they used to teach us.
It's a moron. That's what it's written by a moron. I mean, just to give you the background, they're building a new maternity hospital in the grounds of an old hospital, which is owned by the Catholic Church, and so therefore they don't allow abortions. But he says hospitals will carry out clinical procedures contrary to Catholic ethos.
And I thought I would look up the word maternity just to make sure that I've got it right. So the word maternity means motherhood.
Yes.
It's from the Latin mater, French maternité, I mean, seriously, the word means motherhood. The period during pregnancy and shortly after childbirth, The
world's gone a little bit crazy.
The word has gone completely crazy.
That's Ireland for you.
That is Ireland for you.
Okay, let's
And by the way, was there not something as well in Ireland during COVID? Like while they were suspending almost every possible service in Ireland, medical service, the one thing that they didn't suspend. Am I correct about that?
Was abortions.
Yeah. And they were really happy about that. They were like really proud of that. We need to do something cheerful after that because that's really annoying and enraging. So nice and cheerful and happy thing is a smoothie. So I've never really been a smoothie person. Is that correct, Phelim?
That's correct.
We're not smoothie people.
No.
And I particularly have an issue with the kind of smoothies that Magda eats, by the way. I particularly have a problem with that. Any smoothie that's green actually has always been my problem. And of course, I realise that the green smoothies are the ones that you're meant to have. I'd be having the kind of ones that really should be properly called dessert, right? So what Magda has is something, you see, my problem is...
It's called punishment.
No, when I look at the kind of stuff that Magda has, right, those green things, I always think it looks... Well, I won't say what I think it looks like, but I think you who are listening know what I think it looks like. But anyway, I then came across, because I'm always looking on the interwebs at things, found this recipe that Reese Witherspoon, it's the Reese Witherspoon smoothie. Now, we've made a few adjustments based on what was in the fridge and what we didn't have and what we forgot to buy when we went to the shops. But basically, it's the Reese Witherspoon smoothie, which she has apparently had every morning for 9 years since she got the recipe off Kerry Washington. That's her story. So here it is, and we went out on the patio earlier to make this, and it's kind of funny. If any of you are sharp-eyed, you'll notice that I've done a quick wardrobe change during this podcast and that's one of the things about a very, very vividly green smoothie is...
Yes.
Yeah, it also vividly stains white clothing. So anyway, this is how you make the Reese Witherspoon green smoothie. So it's 2 heads of romaine lettuce. And when I saw that, I thought, how does that even? But of course, those of you who know realise that once that gets into the blender, it becomes nothing. 1 apple, 1 pear, 1 banana, 1 lemon. And she recommended a half a cup of coconut water. We used almond milk. And we added a lime on Magda's recommendation, and I'm in favour of that. Phelim is not so big on the citrus.
Well, we added the lime later on. Initially we smoothed it up.
Let me try it. Oh, it's not terrible. It's not at all terrible.
No, but it's consistency.
You'd like a more smoothie? Mm-hmm. Okay, let's do that.
You smoothed it up. And
we didn't smooth it enough.
I think you didn't smooth it enough. So then we tried it again and we threw in the lime at that stage. Isn't that right?
We did. And you can see us there. And we gave it a very good smoothing with the new Ninja that we have.
Yes.
And I have to say, can I just say... Not that I would ever think that having consumed this, that I would think I would have it every morning for 9 years, because I don't want to eat anything the same for the next 9 years. But I would say I could see that becoming part of our what they call in heavy rotation.
Didn't do us any harm.
It's delicious.
Didn't do any harm.
It doesn't have any kind of yucky agricultural taste of it. Let's just put it that way.
Or eat your greens kind of.
No, but you know that agricultural taste you get from some of those green smoothies? It doesn't have that. And in fact, I think the romaine lettuce is actually the trick here. It has a very, it's got a very nice citrusy light green, actually, without sounding weird. It tastes green. It actually tastes green in a good way. And do you remember that fabulous fellow that we interviewed, Phelim, that time for the Frack Nation documentary? The wonderful man up in Berkeley.
Bruce Ames. Of the Ames cancer test.
Of the Ames cancer test, who basically said, because of course we thought, when we have Bruce Ames of the Ames, we should ask him.
Free medical advice.
Let's get some free medical advice. And we said to him, what would you say we should definitely do? And he said, I'll tell you what you have to do. You have to eat leaves, green leaves every day. Any kind of green leaves, he said, because what's in them, you won't get anywhere else.
Yeah.
It's the only place you'll get that stuff. And obviously to do with photosynthesis and all that green thing. So you need to eat your green things. So Phelim, this could become a new thing with us.
Yes.
I could see this becoming a new thing to us. So loads of you wrote, by the way, and we got some really lovely letters. And I wanted to go through a few of those. And one of them is from our really nice friend, Kathy Claus. This is an incredible letter, and I just thought I'd read the whole thing out. Love the show. Chris and I married quite young and we'll be celebrating our 50th next March. Neither of us look old enough, according to others. Because of being totally blind all my life, my mirror either is very kind or lies all the time. Chris, by the way, is totally sighted and says he married me because I'm not a back or front street driver. Isn't that great? But wait till you hear what she wrote. This is so funny. But the reason for this email is to share an idea I had years ago to present something ludicrous, drawn expertly by a totally blind artist. I actually did draw this out. It was based on an illustration which was raised in my psychology textbook in college. So I played with it and I drew a small circle which, if I remember, is the id, and then a larger circle around that for the ego. And instead of the largest circle around that for the superego, I drew intersecting circles, which turned the whole thing into a mess. We decided that all one needs to do is really get a BS write-up, and someone would be pretentious enough to buy it. I could never actually do it because I couldn't keep a straight face if I was interviewed. But I did do the write-up of the piece, and I share it with you in the hope that you and Phelim get a laugh. So she said, God bless us both, and that we should come to love.
Yeah, so I mean, I think what inspired this was actually Hunter Biden's art, which is basically, you know, a very handy way of laundering money, of bribing the president by giving his son $500,000 for a piece of nonsense art.
Yes.
So,
anyway, so I have to do Kathy Claus. So her description of the piece of art that she did back in the day, the concentric circles that became a mess, you know, and she then decided to write a piece of nonsense because she thought, you know, if you make it sound BS enough, you could sell it.
That's right.
And here's what she called it: enteric-coated ego is a piece depicting the stress of life on the individual who has lived long and loved, suffered and lost. Children are simple beings when small, and the ego is very evident. Mm-hmm. Life in all its iterations twists that ego, wrapping it in layers of protection, which sometimes become evident, and at others become deeply hidden. Enteric-coated ego seeks to give a voice to this process in the life cycle. Allowing one to see glimpses of childhood. And yet perceive the depths to which life has changed and built layers of protection around the psyche. You are adorable, Kathy. You are adorable. So that's fabulous. And by the way, if you have it, would you ever send us a copy of the painting that you did? Because we do need to know.
You know, but just to go back to Hunter Biden, we'll have to go on here. But New York Times did this massive story
this weekend, really brilliant story,
about basically how drug dealers in Philadelphia, they raided these drug dealers and found something like 50 paintings, Picasso's, Mondrian's, all this. And of course, what they realized was they were laundering their money, their tens of millions of dollars through art. Because as one of the dealers, they secretly recorded dealers, the police did, one of the dealers says, artwork, you don't need, there's no title, there's no registration, there's no chain of title, no provenance. You know, you can say, oh, I inherited from my granny. You can say I bought it at a thrift store.
Yep.
I bought it at a yard sale. You know, there's no record, no official records of where art, unlike a car, unlike a house, unlike a boat. You know, I can tell, if you look at every boat in that marina there, Marina del Rey, there's a record of everyone who's ever owned every boat. Yeah. Not with artwork.
That's what the New York Times says. Billions of dollars of art changes hands every year with little or no public scrutiny. Buyers typically have no idea where the work they are purchasing is coming from. Sellers, similarly, are in the dark about where the work is going, and none of the purchasing requires the filing of paperwork that would allow regulators to easily track art sales or profits. By the way, this is unbelievable, but you know that this is kept. But what's really interesting about the New York Times story that I found extraordinary was that Congress in January, mark you, January. What's significant about January, Phelim?
That's when there was an election.
It's also when Trump was still in power.
That's right.
So in January, Congress decided to do something about all this. And in fact, this legislation is in the works still. And I just think it becomes kind of an interesting story because Congress under the Trump administration was trying to regularize this and regulate this and make it very transparent who was buying and selling art. And it'll be interesting to see if that continues now, that the President of the United States has a son who is selling art to who knows who.
Who knows who, and who knows who from where.
Exactly. Another letter from another very nice listener said, my wife and I look forward to your YouTube podcast each week. In addition, this is from Chris. We were allowed to use Chris's name. This is from Chris Nouse. My wife and I look forward to your YouTube podcast each week. In addition to your truth-based content, where we also enjoy the occasional husband and wife banter. Look at us, Phelim. Husband and wife banter. You had us laughing like crazy with the allegation that Phelim had snuck some ice cream and Anne's subsequent historical precedence explanation. My wife and I were reliving our own conversation on the big screen. Keep up the excellent work.
Well, I mean, thank you. Chris, can I just say, you know, the historical precedence explanation is actually, it's very anti-American because Americans believe in redemption and second chances, second acts.
And
you know, that's why I always disagree with F. Scott Fitzgerald. In America, there are second acts. And, I should be allowed to raid the freezer for ice cream once and not go back.
And then another quick one that we got just today, actually, from another listener, Geffen Bar on Saunter. She wrote to us a really nice message that I thought.
By the way, can I just say we spent so much time researching deep political articles and thoughts and interviewing and reading important books, and then what do we get most response to?
Food.
Well, the ice cream, the ice cream saga.
I think the ice cream, though, I think the banana ice cream single ingredient recipe, I think, has been appreciated by far and wide.
Well, this is about me, whether I read it.
I know, Geffen. So Geffen, here's what she says. She says, thank you for bringing truth and creativity together in your inspiring work. Oh, your discussion of ice cream in June 16 podcast reminded me of this poem. And I love this poem. I remember this poem myself. This is Just to Say by William Carlos Williams. I have eaten the plums that were in the icebox, and which you were probably saving for breakfast. Forgive me. They were delicious, so sweet, and so cold. Magnificent.
Thank you. Okay, that's the end of the show, is it?
That is the end of the show. I think, we've kind of crammed a lot in today.
Yes. I think it's
thank you for all the letters, by the way, and for all the messages. We really love them.
And all the
Please
YouTube comments.
Keep them coming. Tell us how your lockdown is going where you are. Please do. We're very grateful for that story from the church in Washington, D.C. Grateful but terrified that this kind of thing is happening. And by the way, why that isn't national news, by the way. As you imagine a police officer with her gun walking down the aisles of a church during a service. How horrible.
Get out.
Get out. Yeah. Get out. Get out. All right, enough of that.
Thank you.
We will see you next week.
Bye.
Bye-bye.